The rattling stagecoach lurched to a halt, sending dust swirling across the desolate Montana landscape as Violet Morgan clutched her meager belongings with trembling hands. It was 1875, and the journey west had been far more brutal than any letter from her future husband had prepared her for. Her right eye was swollen shut, her lips split, and beneath her travel-worn dress, bruises mapped a constellation of pain across her ribs, not from the journey itself, but from what she was running from. Last stop, Timberline. The driver's voice boomed as Violet peered through the dust-coated window at the small frontier town that would be her new home. Her heart hammered against her bruised ribs. Would her husband to be take one look at her battered face and send her straight back east? The thought made her stomach churn. There was nothing to go back to in Boston, only debts, and the man who had given her these bruises when she refused his advances. Adjusting her bonnet to hide as much of her face as possible, Violet stepped down from the stagecoach, wincing as her feet touched the ground. The impact sent pain shooting through her body. She bit back a whimper, determined not to draw attention to herself. "Miss Morgan." A gruff voice called out. She turned, expecting to see Adam Pritchard, the cattle rancher whose advertisement she had answered 3 months ago. Instead, she found herself looking up at a tall, broad-shouldered man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wasn't wearing the formal attire she had expected of a man meeting his bride, but rather a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, dusty trousers, and a cowboy hat that had seen better days. "I'm Violet Morgan," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's storm-gray eyes widened slightly as they took in her battered appearance. His jaw tightened, and Violet braced herself for rejection. "I'm Nathan Reed," he said instead, his voice softening. "Adam Pritchard's foreman. He sent me to collect you." He paused, clearly uncertain how to address her condition. Did something happen on the journey?" Violet clutched her carpet bag tighter. "It's nothing. The roads were rough." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly, clearly not believing her explanation, but he nodded. "Mr. Pritchard is indisposed at the moment. He asked me to bring you to the ranch." Something in his tone made Violet uneasy. "Indisposed?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "I think it's best if we discuss that on the way. May I take your bag?" Reluctantly, Violet handed over her carpet bag, keeping her smaller satchel close. It contained all she had left to value: her mother's locket, a few dollars sewn into the lining, and the letters from Adam Pritchard that had promised her a new life. The wagon ride out of town was silent at first. Violet sat as far from Nathan as the bench seat would allow, watching the town of Timberline fade behind them. Only when they were well on their way did Nathan clear his throat. "Miss Morgan, I'm afraid I have some difficult news," he began, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "Adam Pritchard passed away 2 weeks ago. Influenza took him quickly." The words struck Violet like a physical blow. "Dead," she whispered. "But the arrangements, I've come all this way. I know, and I'm truly sorry. By the time we received word you had accepted his proposal and were on your way, it was too late to send a telegram to stop you." Nathan's knuckles whitened on the reins. "Mr. Pritchard had no family. The ranch has been left to his business partner, who lives in Denver. He's put me in charge until he decides what to do with the property." Violet stared at the landscape, blurring through her tears. All her hopes, the fresh start she had counted on, gone before she even arrived. "What will happen to me now?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Nathan glanced at her, his expression softening. "You're welcome to stay at the ranch until you decide what to do next. There's a small cabin that was meant to be yours. It's nothing fancy, but it's private." "I have nowhere else to go," Violet admitted, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. "No money to return east." Nathan nodded solemnly. "Then you'll stay as our guest for as long as you need." The Pritchard Ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling property nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. A main house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals filled with cattle and horses. It was exactly as Adam had described in his letters. "It's beautiful," Violet murmured. "It is," Nathan agreed. "Adam built it from nothing, started with just 10 acres and a dream 20 years ago." As they approached, several ranch hands paused in their work to watch the wagon arrive. Violet pulled her bonnet lower, acutely aware of her appearance. "That's the main house," Nathan explained, pointing to a 2-story wooden structure. "The bunkhouse is over there for the hands." "And that," he gestured to a small cabin set apart from the others, near a stand of pines, "that's where you'll be staying." The cabin was simple but sturdy, with a small porch and windows on either side of the door. Nathan helped her down from the wagon, careful not to touch her injuries, and carried her bag inside. The interior was modest but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a bedroom visible through an open door, and what appeared to be a washing room. Someone had placed fresh wildflowers in a jar on the table. "Mrs. Hollies, our cook, prepared it for you," Nathan explained. "She's put some food in the pantry and there's fresh water in the barrel out back." Violet stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed. "This is very kind." Nathan set her bag down. "Get some rest. When you're ready, come up to the main house. Mrs. Hollies will have dinner at 6. He hesitated at the door. "Miss Morgan, whatever happened to you before you got here, you're safe now. No one at this ranch will harm you." His words, spoken with such certainty, nearly broke her composure. She managed a small nod, waiting until the door closed behind him before sinking onto a chair and finally allowing her tears to fall. When Violet awoke, the afternoon light was casting long shadows across the cabin floor. She must have fallen asleep in the chair, exhaustion finally claiming her. Moving carefully to avoid aggravating her injuries, she found the washing room and poured water from a pitcher into a basin. The face that stared back at her from the small mirror was barely recognizable. Her right eye was swollen and rimmed with purple, her lips split and crusted with dried blood. Gingerly, she washed away the dirt of travel, wincing as the cool water touched her wounds. Her ribs protested as she changed into a clean dress, her second best, saved for her arrival. The best one had been packed at the bottom of her trunk, which would arrive on the next freight wagon from the railroad station. If it arrived at all. The dinner hour was approaching, and despite her nervousness about facing strangers, hunger drove her toward the main house. The walk was longer than it had appeared from the wagon, and by the time she reached the porch, Violet was breathing heavily, one hand pressed against her side. Before she could knock, the door swung open, revealing a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. "There you are, child. I was just about to send one of the boys to fetch you." Her smile faltered slightly as she took in Violet's appearance, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "I'm Martha Hollies. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The main house was warm and filled with the smell of roasting meat and freshly baked bread. Martha led her to a large dining room where a table was set for several people. "The men eat in shifts," Martha explained. "The hands take their meals in the bunkhouse, but Nathan and the other senior hands eat here." As if summoned by his name, Nathan appeared in the doorway, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt. His eyes found Violet's immediately, and she was struck again by their unusual color, not quite blue, not quite gray, like the sky before a storm. "Miss Morgan," he greeted her with a small nod. "I'm glad you decided to join us." 2 other men entered behind him, one older with a white beard, the other younger with sandy hair. Both looked at Violet with undisguised curiosity. "This is Harold, our blacksmith," Nathan introduced the older man, "and Thomas, who manages the cattle." He pulled out a chair for Violet. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Violet Morgan." Dinner was a quiet affair, with conversation carefully steered away from Violet's injuries or her unusual circumstances. Instead, Martha kept things light, talking about the upcoming harvest festival in town and the neighboring ranches. When the meal was finished, Nathan walked Violet back to her cabin. The night was cool, the sky ablaze with more stars than she had ever seen in Boston. "I've arranged for Dr. Miller to visit tomorrow," Nathan said as they reached her porch. "He comes by once a month to check on the men anyway." Violet stiffened. "That's not necessary, I'm fine." "Miss Morgan," Nathan said gently, "your injuries need proper attention. The doctor is discreet." She wanted to refuse, but the throbbing pain in her ribs made her reconsider. "Very well." Nathan tipped his hat. "Good night, Miss Morgan, Mr." "Read," she called as he turned to leave. "Thank you." He paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Get some rest. Things often look better in the morning light." But when morning came, Violet's injuries seemed worse, not better. The bruises had deepened to a dark purple, and each breath sent pain shooting through her side. She managed to dress and make herself a simple breakfast from the supplies Martha had provided, but by mid-morning, she was so dizzy from pain that she had to sit on the porch steps, head between her knees. That was how Dr. Miller found her, Nathan at his side, both men dismounting from their horses with concern etched on their faces. "Miss Morgan." The doctor knelt beside her, his kind face framed by spectacles. "I'm Dr. Miller. Nathan asked me to check on you." Violet wanted to protest, but the pain was overwhelming. She allowed Nathan to help her back into the cabin, where Dr. Miller examined her with professional efficiency. "3 broken ribs," he announced after gentle probing that left Violet biting her lip to keep from crying out. "And that I will take some time to heal. The rest are surface bruises." He fixed her with a stern look. "These injuries didn't come from a stagecoach ride, young lady." Violet looked away. "It doesn't matter now." Dr. Miller exchanged a glance with Nathan. "Well, whoever did this to you isn't here, and that's what matters. I'm going to wrap those ribs tight, and I'll leave some salve for the bruises." After the doctor left, Nathan lingered, clearly uncomfortable. "Dr. Miller says you need rest. Martha will bring your meals for a few days." "I don't want to be a burden," Violet protested. "You're not," Nathan said firmly. "You came here expecting to be a bride, not an invalid. The least we can do is help you recover." The days that followed fell into a quiet routine. Martha brought meals and stayed to chat, filling Violet in on the history of the ranch and its people. Thomas sometimes accompanied her, his sandy hair always falling into his eyes as he told stories that made Violet laugh, despite the pain in her ribs. And each evening, Nathan would stop by, never staying long but always asking if she needed anything. Sometimes he brought books from the main house's small library or wildflowers he'd picked on his rides. One evening, a week after her arrival, Violet was sitting on her porch watching the sunset when Nathan approached, leading his horse. "Feel up to a short ride?" he asked. "There's something I'd like to show you." Violet hesitated. Her ribs still ached, but the tight-binding Dr. Miller had applied made movement more bearable. "I'm not sure I can ride." "You won't have to. Samson here is gentle as a lamb. I'll lead him, and you just hold on." Curiosity won out over caution. With Nathan's help, she settled into the saddle, holding the pommel as he led the horse away from the ranch buildings. They followed a narrow trail that wound through a stand of pines until they emerged at the edge of a small lake, its surface reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "It's beautiful," Violet breathed. Nathan helped her down, and they sat on a fallen log near the shore. "Adam used to bring me here when I first started working for him," he said quietly. "Said it was the heart of the ranch." "How long have you worked here?" Violet asked. 8 years. "Came when I was 20, nothing but a head-headed cowboy who thought he knew everything." A smile touched his lips. "Adam set me straight quick enough. He sounds like a good man." He was. Nathan picked up a stone and skipped it across the lake's surface. "Treated his workers fair, built something that will last. And now it belongs to someone else," Violet said softly. Nathan nodded, his expression tightening. "Richard Harding, Adam's partner in some investments, never set foot on this land, but he owns it all now." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. "What will you do?" Violet finally asked. "When Mr. Harding decides what to do with the ranch," Nathan shrugged. "Move on, I suppose. Find another ranch that needs a foreman." He glanced at her. "What about you?" "Any thoughts about your future?" Violet looked out over the water. "I never expected to be widowed before I was even married," she said with a sad smile. "I have some skills I can sew, keep accounts. Perhaps there's work in town. Timberline's growing. They might need a school teacher." "The last one married a miner and moved to California." "I've never taught," Violet admitted. "Can you read, write, do sums?" When she nodded, Nathan smiled. "That's more education than most folks around here. Think about it." As darkness fell, they rode back to the ranch, Violet more comfortable on the horse this time. When they reached her cabin, Nathan helped her down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Thank you for showing me the lake," she said. "You're welcome." He hesitated, then added, "Miss Morgan, I know it's not my place to ask, but who hurt you?" Violet stiffened, looking away. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." The intensity in his voice made her look up. His eyes were dark in the fading light, but she could see the anger there, not directed at her, but at whoever had caused her pain. "His name was James Harrington," she said finally. "He was my employer in Boston. I worked as his housekeeper after my father died, leaving nothing but debts." The words came easier than she expected, tumbling out after being held inside for so long. "He made advances. When I refused, he became violent, said he owned me because of my father's debts." Nathan's jaw tightened. "So you answered Adam's advertisement," Violet nodded. "I slipped away in the night, used the last of my savings for the train ticket west." She wrapped her arms around herself. "The night before I left, he found me packing. He was very angry." Nathan's hand moved toward her face, stopping just short of touching her bruised cheek. "He can't hurt you here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know," Violet whispered. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see the flecks of blue in his storm-gray eyes. Then Nathan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good night, Miss Morgan." "Good night, Mr. Reed." As the days passed, Violet's bruises began to fade, the swelling around her eye receding until she could see clearly again. Dr. Miller removed the tight binding around her ribs, replacing it with a looser wrap that allowed her more freedom of movement. "Another few weeks and you'll be good as new," he pronounced. "Just don't go riding any wild broncos in the meantime." With her increasing mobility came a growing restlessness. The small cabin, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a prison. She started taking short walks around the ranch, gaining strength each day. Martha welcomed her help in the kitchen, teaching her to make sourdough bread and sharing recipes that had been passed down through generations. Thomas showed her the new calves in the corral, letting her feed them from a bottle. Even Harold, the gruff blacksmith, warmed to her presence, demonstrating how he shaped horseshoes in his forge, but it was Nathan who made her feel most welcome. He seemed to appear whenever she ventured out, casually joining her walks or inviting her to watch as he worked with the horses. He never mentioned their conversation about James Harrington, but his quiet protectiveness spoke volumes. One morning, Nathan found Violet sitting on a fence, watching as he gentled a spirited mare in the corral. "She's beautiful," Violet called as the dappled gray horse pranced around Nathan. "She is," he agreed, letting the mare sniff his hand before stroking her neck. "But she's got a mind of her own. What's her name?" "Doesn't have one yet. She's new, came with the last herd we brought in from the north pasture." Nathan led the mare toward where Violet sat. "Want to give her a try?" Violet's eyes widened. "Oh, I couldn't. I've never really ridden." "Just to pet her," Nathan clarified with a smile. "No riding until those ribs are fully healed." Cautiously, Violet extended her hand. The mare snorted, then stretched her neck to sniff Violet's fingers. "She likes you," Nathan said as the horse nudged Violet's palm. "How can you tell?" "She's curious, not afraid." He handed Violet an apple slice. "Here, let her take it from your hand. Keep your palm flat." The mare's lips tickled as she delicately took the apple, making Violet laugh. "She's so gentle." "Most creatures are if you approach them right," Nathan said, watching Violet with the horse. "It's only when they've been hurt that they get skittish or mean." Violet glanced at him, knowing he wasn't just talking about horses. "And how do you gentle a creature that's been hurt?" "Patience." "Kindness." Nathan's eyes met hers. "Time." The moment stretched between them, something unspoken passing in the air, then the mare tossed her head, breaking the spell. "You should name her," Nathan said. Violet stroked the mare's nose. "Willow." "She reminds me of the willow trees by the river where I grew up." "Willow it is." Nathan smiled. "And maybe once Dr. Miller says you're healed, I can teach you to ride her." "I'd like that," Violet said softly. That evening, a wagon arrived from town, carrying supplies and mail. Among the packages was Violet's trunk, finally delivered from the railroad station. "It's like Christmas," Martha declared as she helped Violet unpack the trunk in her cabin. "Oh my, what a lovely dress." Violet lifted out the pale blue silk gown she had intended to wear for her wedding. It seemed from another lifetime now. I had it made specially, she said, running her fingers over the delicate fabric. Well, you'll have a chance to wear it soon enough, Martha said, folding the dress carefully. The harvest festival is in 2 weeks. The whole town turns out for it, dancing, food, games for the children. I couldn't possibly go, Violet protested. And why not? Martha put her hands on her hips. You're a young woman who deserves some joy. Besides, Nathan's been chosen as a judge for the horse races this year. He'll need someone to keep him company. Violet felt her cheeks warm. Mr. Reed has been very kind, but I'm sure he has no interest in escorting a woman who arrived to marry another man. Martha's eyes twinkled. Is that what you think? My dear, I've known Nathan Reed for 8 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Before Violet could respond, a knock at the door announced Nathan himself, coming to help move the heavy trunk inside. Everything arrive intact? He asked, glancing at the items spread across Violet's bed. Yes, thank you, Violet said, hurriedly covering the blue dress. I was just telling Violet about the Harvest Festival, Martha said, giving Nathan a meaningful look. Ah, yes, big event for Timberline. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. I'm judging the races this year. So I heard, Violet said, avoiding his eyes. An awkward silence fell, broken by Martha clearing her throat. Well, I should get back to the house. Need to start dinner. She patted Violet's arm. Think about what I said, dear. After Martha left, Nathan lingered, hat in hand. I actually came to tell you that I received a letter from Richard Harding today. Violet's heart sank. Is he selling the ranch? No, not yet, but he's coming to inspect it next month. Nathan twisted his hat brim. He wants to meet with me about the future of the property. That's good news, isn't it? At least the ranch isn't being sold immediately. Nathan nodded, though his expression remained troubled. There's something else. The letter mentioned Adam's mail-order bride situation, as he called it. He knows you're here. Violet sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. Does he want me to leave? No, Nathan said quickly. In fact, he said that any arrangements Adam made should be honored. He hesitated. He suggested that you might stay on as the housekeeper for the main house, with a proper salary. A housekeeper, Violet repeated. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had fled one position as a housekeeper, only to be offered another. It would be different here, Nathan said, as if reading her thoughts. You'd be respected, not what you experienced before, Violet nodded slowly. It's a generous offer. Please thank Mr. Harding for me when you respond. You'll consider it then. Yes, she said, though the prospect filled her with a strange melancholy. I'll consider it. Nathan nodded, turning to leave, then stopped. Miss Morgan, Violet, about the Harvest Festival, would you? That is, if you're feeling well enough. Would you allow me to escort you? The request, so formal and yet so earnest, brought a genuine smile to Violet's face. I would like that very much, Mr. Reed. Nathan, he corrected her softly. If we're to attend the festival together, I think you should call me Nathan. Nathan, she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her lips. Then yes, I would be honored to accompany you. His answering smile transformed his face, softening the lines that worry had etched there. Until then, Violet. After he left, Violet sat for a long time, staring at the blue silk dress spread across her bed. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt a flutter of something like hope in her chest. The 2 weeks leading up to the Harvest Festival passed in a flurry of preparation. The entire ranch seemed caught up in the excitement, with even the most taciturn ranch hands discussing the horse races and betting on winners. Violet's health continued to improve, her ribs now only twinging when she moved too quickly. Doctor Miller pronounced her healing well during his monthly visit. You're a resilient young woman, he told her approvingly. Just don't overdo it at the festival. No wild dancing until those ribs are fully mended. The morning of the festival dawned clear and crisp, with just a hint of autumn in the air. Violet spent extra time preparing, washing her hair and pinning it up in a style she hadn't attempted since leaving Boston. The blue silk dress fit perfectly, though she had lost weight during her recovery. Martha arrived to help with the finishing touches, exclaiming over the dress, "You look like a princess. Nathan won't know what hit him." A knock at the door announced his arrival. When Violet opened it, she found Nathan standing on her porch, looking almost unrecognizable in a clean black suit and white shirt, his usually unruly hair slicked back, hat in hand. His eyes widened as he took in her appearance. "Violet," he breathed. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she said, suddenly shy. "You look very handsome yourself." Nathan offered his arm, and together they walked to the wagon where Martha and several others were already waiting. The ride into Timberline was filled with laughter and anticipation, with Thomas entertaining everyone with stories of past festivals. Timberline had transformed for the occasion. The main street was decorated with bunting and lanterns. Stalls lined the road selling food and trinkets, and a large area had been cleared for dancing. Beyond the town, a makeshift racetrack had been set up in a flat meadow. "It's wonderful," Violet said as Nathan helped her down from the wagon. "I've never seen anything like it." "Wait until you try Mrs. Peterson's apple pie," Nathan grinned. "It won the blue ribbon 3 years running." They spent the morning exploring the festival, stopping to talk with townspeople who all seemed curious about the woman on Nathan Reed's arm. Violet was introduced as Miss Morgan, a guest at the Pritchard Ranch, with no mention of her original purpose in coming west. After lunch, Nathan reluctantly left her with Martha to fulfill his judging duties at the horse races. "Save a dance for me tonight," he asked before leaving. "I'll save all of them," Violet promised. The races were thrilling, with cowboys showing off their riding skills as they thundered around the track. Violet found herself cheering as loudly as anyone else when Thomas took second place in the final race. As evening fell, lanterns were lit and a band began to play. Tables groaned under the weight of food brought by families from miles around. Violet helped Martha arrange the ranch's contributions: 3 pies, a ham, and a large pot of beans. She was placing the last pie when a hand touched her elbow. "May I have that dance now?" Nathan stood beside her, his face flushed with excitement from the races, his gray eyes warm as they met hers. Without waiting for an answer, he led her to the dance floor just as the band began a waltz. "I should warn you," Violet said as he placed a hand at her waist. "I haven't danced in years." "Just follow my lead," Nathan said, guiding her into the first steps. To Violet's surprise, Nathan was an excellent dancer, moving with a grace that belied his cowboy appearance. He held her carefully, mindful of her healing ribs, but with a confidence that made her feel secure in his arms. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked as he guided her through a turn. "My mother insisted all her sons learn, said no Reed boy would embarrass her at social gatherings." A shadow crossed his face. "She died when I was 15, influenza." "I'm sorry," Violet said softly. "My mother died when I was 12. It's a hard thing losing a parent so young." Nathan nodded, his hand tightening slightly on hers. "It is. My father followed her a year later. Folks said he died of a broken heart, but it was more likely the whiskey he took to after she passed." "So you were alone at 16. Had my brothers, 3 of them, all older. They did their best, but we were dirt poor. I left home at 18, headed west to make my fortune." He smiled ruefully. Still working on that part. The music changed to a livelier tune, and other couples joined them on the dance floor. Nathan kept her close, their conversation growing more personal as the evening progressed. He told her about his years drifting from ranch to ranch before finding a home at the Pritchard place. She shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her father's failed business ventures, and her dreams of someday having a home of her own. "Not a grand house," she explained as they paused for lemonade. "Just somewhere that belongs to me, where I can plant flowers and watch them grow year after year." "Sounds nice," Nathan said, his eyes never leaving her face. "A place to put down roots." As the night wore on, Violet became aware of curious glances and whispered conversations. Finally, an older woman approached them, her gray hair neatly tucked under a flowered bonnet. "Nathan Reed, aren't you going to introduce me to your young lady?" she demanded, though her eyes were kind. "Mrs. Lawson," Nathan said, standing straighter. "This is Miss Violet Morgan. Violet, Mrs. Lawson is our town's unofficial historian and official busybody." "Flatterer," Mrs. Lawson sniffed, turning to Violet. "So you're the young woman staying out at the Pritchard place." "We were all sorry to hear about your situation." Violet tensed. "My situation? coming all this way to marry poor Adam only to find him gone. Mrs. Lawson patted her hand. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, doesn't it? But it seems you've landed on your feet. Her meaningful glance at Nathan made Violet blush. Mr. Reed has been very kind, she said carefully. More than kind from the looks of it, Mrs. Lawson observed with a smile. Well, I won't keep you from your dancing, but do come visit me in town sometime, dear. I run the general store, and we don't get nearly enough female company around here. After she left, Violet looked questioningly at Nathan. How does she know about me? Nathan sighed. Small towns have no secrets. Adam told Sheriff Cooper about his mail-order bride, the sheriff told his wife, and well. Now everyone knows, Violet finished. Are you upset? She considered the question. No, she said finally. It's the truth after all, and people seem kind about it. They are, Nathan assured her. Timberline folks look after their own. But I'm not one of their own, Violet pointed out. I'm a stranger who arrived under unusual circumstances. Nathan's hand found hers. You could be, one of their own, I mean, if you wanted to stay. There was something in his voice, a question he wasn't quite asking. Violet looked up at him, at the earnest expression on his face, and felt her heart beating faster. I think I would like that, she said softly. Nathan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then may I have another dance, Miss Morgan? You may have as many as you like, Mr. Reed. They danced until the band played their final song, a slow waltz that brought them closer together than propriety strictly allowed. As they swayed to the music, Violet rested her head against Nathan's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. I never expected this, she murmured. What? To feel happy again, to feel safe. Nathan's arms tightened around her. You deserve both, Violet. Happiness and safety. When the music ended, neither moved immediately, reluctant to break the moment. Finally, Nathan stepped back, though he kept hold of her hand. We should head back, he said regretfully. It's a long ride to the ranch. The wagon ride home was quieter than the journey in, with most of the ranch hands half asleep after the day's festivities. Martha dozed against Thomas's shoulder, while Harold snored softly from the back. Nathan and Violet sat side by side on the driver's bench, a blanket shared between them against the night's chill. Under the cover of darkness and the blanket, Nathan's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Neither spoke, but the silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken feelings and the promise of something new beginning. When they reached the ranch, Nathan walked Violet to her cabin, the moonlight illuminating the path. At her door, he hesitated. Thank you for coming with me tonight, he said. Thank you for asking me, Violet replied. I had a wonderful time. Nathan took a step closer. Violet, he paused, seeming to struggle for words. I know you came here expecting a different life, and I know it's only been a few weeks, but I want you to know that I care for you. More than I should, perhaps. Violet's heart raced. I care for you too, Nathan. His hand came up to cup her cheek, so gently it brought tears to her eyes. May I call on you properly, not as Adam's foreman or your friend, but as a man who wishes to court you? Yes, Violet whispered without hesitation. I would like that very much. Nathan's smile was visible even in the dim light. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it made her ache. When they parted, both were breathless, despite the gentleness of the kiss. Good night, Violet, Nathan said, his voice husky. Good night, Nathan. As she closed the door behind her, Violet pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. For the first time since leaving Boston, the future didn't seem frightening. It seemed full of possibility. The weeks following the Harvest Festival were the happiest Violet had known. True to his word, Nathan courted her properly, taking her on rides around the ranch property, bringing her wildflowers and sitting with her on her porch in the evenings to watch the sunset. Dr. Miller pronounced her fully healed at his next visit, and Nathan began teaching her to ride Willow, the dappled gray mare that had taken a liking to Violet. She proved to be a natural horsewoman, quickly gaining confidence in the saddle. You've got a good seat, Nathan complimented her after a particularly long ride. Most beginners bounce around like a sack of potatoes. Violet laughed, patting Willow's neck. I have a good teacher and a patient horse. Life at the ranch settled into a pleasant routine. Violet helped Martha with meals and began taking on other duties around the main house, earning her keep as she considered Richard Harding's offer of employment. But as October turned to November, a shadow loomed over their happiness: Harding's impending visit. Nathan grew increasingly tense as the date approached, spending long hours in the ranch office reviewing ledgers and preparing reports. "He'll arrive on the 15th, Nathan told Violet one evening as they sat by her fireplace, "staying for a week to inspect the property." "You're worried," Violet observed, taking his hand. Nathan sighed. "Harding's a businessman, not a rancher. He sees the land as an investment, not a home. I'm afraid of what changes he might make. The ranch is profitable, isn't it?" "Yes, very. Adam built it well." Nathan squeezed her hand. "But profit isn't everything. This place supports 15 families the ranch hands," Martha heralded. "If Harding decides to sell to one of the big cattle operations moving in from Texas." He didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone knew the large cattle companies were buying up smaller ranches across the territory, often replacing workers with their own men. "What about you?" Violet asked softly. "What will you do if he sells?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I've been saving. Not enough to buy the whole ranch, but maybe a piece of it, or another small place nearby." He looked at her, his eyes serious. "I don't want to leave this valley. It's home now." The intensity in his gaze made Violet's heart skip. She knew he wasn't just talking about the land. "Then we'll pray Mr. Harding sees the value in keeping things as they are," she said. Richard Harding arrived on schedule. A tall, thin man with sharp features and expensive clothes that seemed out of place on the frontier. His first act upon arriving was to request a complete tour of the property, which Nathan provided while Violet and Martha prepared a welcome dinner. "What do you think?" Violet asked when Nathan returned to the main house that evening. "Hard to say. He asked a lot of questions about the finances, the water rights, the grazing land." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. He seemed impressed with the operation but didn't give away much of his own thoughts. Dinner was a formal affair, with Martha serving her best dishes and all the senior hands present in clean shirts. Harding sat at the head of the table, with Nathan at his right and Violet at his left. "So, Miss Morgan," Harding said as the meal progressed, "Nathan tells me you arrived under rather unusual circumstances." Violet set down her fork. "Yes, sir, I came to marry Mr. Pritchard but arrived after his passing." "A tragic situation," Harding nodded. "And now you're considering staying on as housekeeper." "I'm considering my options," Violet said carefully. Harding's shrewd eyes moved between her and Nathan. "I see. Well, the offer stands. The ranch will need proper management of the main house, regardless of what decisions are made about its future." The remainder of the week followed a similar pattern. Harding spent his days inspecting every aspect of the ranch, making notes in a small leather-bound book, and his evenings questioning Nathan about operations and future prospects. Violet saw little of Nathan during this time, as he was constantly at Harding's side. The few moments they managed to steal together were brief and often interrupted. "He's running me ragged," Nathan admitted one evening when he stopped by Violet's cabin for just a few minutes. "But at least he's being thorough. That has to be a good sign, doesn't it?" "I hope so," Violet said, wishing she could ease the worry lines from his forehead. On Harding's final evening at the ranch, he requested a private dinner with Nathan in the main house. Violet waited anxiously in her cabin, knowing this meeting would likely determine the fate of the ranch and perhaps her future with Nathan. It was nearly midnight when a knock came at her door. Nathan stood on her porch, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "May I come in?" he asked. Violet ushered him inside, lighting a lamp as he took a seat by the cold fireplace. His face in the lamplight looked tired but strangely peaceful. "What happened?" she asked, sitting across from him. "Harding made me an offer," Nathan said. "He wants me to buy the ranch." Violet's breath caught. "The entire ranch, but you said you didn't have enough saved." "I don't. Not for the full value." Nathan leaned forward. "But he's offering it at half the market price with a 5-year payment plan for the remainder." "Why would he do that?" He said. "Adam always spoke highly of me." Said Adam wanted the ranch to stay intact, not be broken up or sold to outsiders. A small smile touched Nathan's lips, and he said he's got enough investments in Denver to keep him busy without worrying about a cattle ranch in Montana. Nathan, that's wonderful. Violet exclaimed, moving to kneel beside his chair. You can keep the ranch, keep everyone employed. I can, he agreed, taking her hands in his. But there's more. Harding had a condition. Violet's happiness faltered. What condition? That I take on a partner. Someone with a head for figures and the ability to manage the household while I manage the land. Nathan's eyes held hers. He suggested my wife would be the natural choice. For a moment, Violet couldn't breathe. Your wife. He was rather pointed about it, Nathan said, a hint of humor in his voice. Said a ranch this size needs a woman's touch and that I'd be a fool not to recognize what was right in front of me. Oh, Violet whispered. Nathan slid from the chair to kneel beside her on the floor. Violet, this isn't how I planned to do this. I wanted more time, wanted to court you properly for months, not weeks, but Harding leaves tomorrow with my answer and I need to know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single pearl. I love you, Violet Morgan. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stepped down from that stagecoach, bruised but unbowed. You're the strongest, kindest woman I've ever known, and I want to spend my life with you. His voice trembled slightly. Will you marry me? Be my partner in life and in this ranch. Tears filled Violet's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. With shaking hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was my mother's, he explained. I've carried it with me since leaving home, waiting for the right woman to give it to. It's beautiful, Violet said, looking at the pearl gleaming in the lamplight. And I love you too, Nathan Reed, more than I ever thought possible after what happened in Boston. Nathan gathered her into his arms, his kiss far less restrained than their first one. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. I promise you, Violet, no one will ever hurt you again, not while I'm alive. I know, she said, because she did. In Nathan's arms, she had found not just safety, but a love strong enough to heal the wounds of her past. They were married 2 weeks later in Timberline's small church, with the entire town and ranch turning out for the celebration. Violet wore her blue silk dress, finally fulfilling its purpose, though for a different groom than she had originally intended. Martha cried throughout the ceremony, while Thomas and Harold stood proudly as Nathan's groomsmen. Mrs. Lawson from the general store arranged flowers for the church, and Dr. Miller gave a toast at the reception that had everyone laughing and raising their glasses. To Nathan and Violet Reed, he proclaimed, proof that sometimes life's hardest journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Their wedding night was spent in the main house, which was now theirs. Nathan had moved Violet's things from the cabin that morning, arranging them carefully in what had been Adam Pritchard's bedroom. As they stood in the doorway of their new home, Nathan swept Violet into his arms, carrying her across the threshold. Welcome home, Mrs. Reed, he said, setting her down gently in the entryway. Home, Violet repeated, looking around the house that would now be hers to manage. I like the sound of that. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Violet's head on Nathan's chest and his arms around her, she marveled at the twist of fate that had brought her here. She had come west broken and afraid, fleeing a man who had tried to crush her spirit. Instead, she had found healing, purpose, and a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. How strange life is, she answered. If things had gone as planned, I would have married Adam, and you and I would never have. I've thought about that too, Nathan admitted. It's hard to be grateful for Adam's death, but I can't help being thankful for the chance to love you. Violet raised herself on one elbow to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. I think Adam would understand. He built this place to last, to be a home for generations. Now it will be. It will, Nathan agreed, pulling her back into his arms. Our home. And someday, our children's home. The thought of children, of building a family with Nathan on this land they both loved, filled Violet with a joy so complete it brought tears to her eyes. I never thought I could be this happy, she whispered against his chest. Get used to it, Mrs. Reed, Nathan said, kissing the top of her head. I plan to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Winter came to the valley, blanketing the ranch in snow and bringing quiet days where the work slowed and evenings lengthened. Nathan and Violet settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both, as if they had been meant for each other all along. Martha stayed on as cook, though she now had Violet's help with many tasks. The ranch hands accepted Violet as their boss's wife with respect and a touch of protectiveness, especially Thomas and Harold, who had witnessed her healing from the beginning. As Christmas approached, Nathan surprised Violet by bringing home a small pine tree to set up in the main house's parlor. My mother always insisted on a tree, he explained as they decorated it with paper stars Violet had cut and strings of dried berries. Said it wasn't Christmas without the smell of pine in the house. They invited the entire ranch for Christmas dinner, setting up long tables in the main house and preparing for days. Martha outdid herself with the feast, and Violet baked pies using her mother's recipes. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with singing and storytelling around the fireplace. As the last guests departed for the bunkhouse, Nathan pulled Violet into his arms beneath the mistletoe he had hung in the doorway. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Reed," he murmured against her lips. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Reed," she answered, melting into his embrace. Later, as they prepared for bed, Violet handed Nathan a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I have one more gift for you," she said shyly. Nathan unwrapped it to find a tiny pair of knitted booties. He stared at them uncomprehendingly for a moment, then his eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Violet, are you?" She nodded, her hands going to her stomach. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive in early summer." Nathan let out a whoop of joy that probably woke half the ranch, then gathered her in his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm in a delicate condition, remember?" He set her down immediately, his face contrite. "I'm sorry, I didn't hurt you, did I?" "Or the baby. We're fine," she assured him, touched by his concern, but perhaps less exuberant celebrations for the next few months. Nathan knelt before her, placing his hands reverently on her still flat abdomen. "A baby," he whispered, "our baby." The wonder in his voice brought tears to Violet's eyes. She had worried briefly about how he would take the news. They had discussed children, of course, but hadn't planned on starting their family quite so soon. "Are you happy?" she asked. Nathan looked up at her, his eyes shining. "Happier than I've ever been. Are you?" "Yes," she said simply. "I never thought I would have this, a husband who loves me, a home of my own, a child on the way. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find it was all a dream." Nathan stood, gathering her close. "Not a dream. And if it is, then we're dreaming it together." As spring returned to the valley, bringing new calves to the herd and wildflowers to the meadows, Violet's body changed with the season. Her slender frame rounded, her cheeks glowed with health, and her steps slowed as the baby grew within her. Nathan watched these changes with a mixture of pride and concern, insisting she rest more and taking on some of her household duties despite her protests. "I'm pregnant, not ill," she reminded him frequently. "Humor me," he would reply, kissing her forehead. "It's my first time being an expectant father." As her time drew nearer, Martha moved into the main house to help, and Nathan sent for a midwife from a neighboring town to stay until the birth. "Everything looks just as it should," Mrs. Winters, the midwife, assured them after examining Violet. "A fine, healthy baby positioned well. I'd say you have about 3 more weeks." But babies, as Mrs. Winters warned them, often had their own schedules. Just 2 days later, while Nathan was out checking on the north pasture, Violet felt the first sharp pain. "It's time," Martha said grimly when Violet called for her. "Thomas, ride out and find Nathan. Mrs. Winters will need hot water and clean linens." The hours that followed were a blur of pain and waiting. Nathan arrived, wild-eyed and breathless, having ridden harder than was wise after Thomas found him. "I'm here," he said, taking Violet's hand. "I'm right here. You can't stay," Mrs. Winters informed him firmly. "Men have no place in a birthing room." "Please," Violet gasped between contractions. "I want him with me." The midwife looked scandalized but relented when Martha backed Violet's request. "It's their child and their decision," the older woman said firmly. So Nathan stayed, holding Violet's hand through each pain, wiping her brow and murmuring encouragement when she felt she couldn't continue. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her. "You can do this." As the summer sun set over the mountains, casting the valley in golden light, their daughter was born a perfect, red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire ranch. "A girl," Mrs. Winters announced, placing the swaddled infant in Violet's arms. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Violet looked down at the tiny face, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Look what we made, Nathan." Nathan, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, touched their daughter's cheek with a gentle finger. "She's perfect, just like her mother." They named her Elizabeth, after Nathan's mother, with the middle name Grace because, Violet explained, "she is the grace that came from all our hardships." Life with a newborn brought new challenges and joys. Sleepless nights were balanced by the wonder of watching Elizabeth discover the world. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable cradling his daughter as he was breaking a wild horse. When Elizabeth was 3 months old, a letter arrived from Boston. Violet recognized the handwriting immediately. Her former employer, James Harrington. "How did he find me?" she asked, her hands shaking as she held the unopened envelope. "Do you want me to read it first?" Nathan offered, his face tight with concern. Violet shook her head. "No, whatever it says, we'll face it together." The letter was brief, its tone formal. "Miss Morgan, I have been informed by mutual acquaintances that you have relocated to Montana Territory and entered into marriage. I write to inform you that I consider all debts owed by your late father to be settled. I wish you well in your new life." "James Harrington, that's it?" Nathan asked when she finished reading it aloud. "No threats, no demands." "Nothing," Violet said, puzzled. "I wonder what changed." The answer came a week later in a letter from Mrs. Lawson, who had been corresponding with Violet regularly since their meeting at the Harvest Festival. "My dear Violet, you will be interested to know that I took the liberty of writing to the sheriff in Boston some months ago, inquiring about a certain Mr. Harrington who had mistreated a young friend of mine. It seems the gentleman has had similar complaints from other young women in his employ, and the authorities were most interested in my information. I understand he is now facing significant legal difficulties and social ostracism. I hope this brings you some peace, dear. Fondly, Margaret Lawson." "She did that for me," Violet whispered, tears filling her eyes. "A woman who barely knew me, I told you," Nathan said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Timberline folks look after their own." The knowledge that James Harrington was facing consequences for his actions lifted a weight from Violet's shoulders she hadn't realized she still carried. That night, as she nursed Elizabeth by the fire, she felt a sense of completion, the final piece of her past put to rest. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, watching them from his chair. "How far I've come," Violet answered. "A year ago I was bruised and running for my life. Now I have everything I ever dreamed of." Nathan moved to kneel beside them, placing one hand on his daughter's head and the other on his wife's cheek. "We both do." As Elizabeth grew from infant to toddler, the ranch flourished under the Reeds' care. Nathan's careful management and Violet's sharp business sense made it even more profitable than it had been under Adam Pritchard. When Elizabeth was 2, they welcomed a son, William, born on a clear winter night with much less drama than his sister's arrival. And a year after that, twin boys, Joseph and Henry, completed their family. The small cabin where Violet had first stayed became a schoolhouse, with Violet teaching not only her own children but those of the ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders. The main house expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Nathan adding rooms as they were needed. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Nathan took Violet to the lake where he had first shown her the heart of the ranch. They picnicked on the shore while their children played under Martha's watchful eye. "I've been thinking," Nathan said as they watched the sunset reflect on the water. "We should build a proper schoolhouse in town. Timberline's growing and your little cabin school is bursting at the seams." Violet nodded. Mrs. Lawson mentioned the same thing in her last letter. "The town council is discussing it." I think we should donate the land and part of the funding, Nathan continued. As a way of giving back to the community that welcomed us. Violet leaned against his shoulder. I think that's a wonderful idea, and perhaps a small hospital as well. Dr. Miller isn't getting any younger, and he mentioned wanting to train a successor. Nathan laughed. Is there anything else you'd like to build while we're at it? A church? A new general store? Maybe next year, Violet teased. One project at a time. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders. Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been? He asked. If you hadn't come west, or if Adam had lived. Sometimes, Violet admitted. But then I look at our children, at what we've built together, and I know this is exactly where I'm meant to be. She turned to face him. I came west broken, Nathan. You helped heal me with your love. Everything else, the ranch, the children, our place in this community, it all started with that. Nathan's kiss was as tender as their first, filled with the same wonder but deepened by years of shared life and love. Come on, he said, helping her to her feet. Let's go home. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the ranch, where their children waited, where their future continued to unfold in the land. They both loved a future neither could have imagined when a battered mail-order bride stepped off a stagecoach and into the arms of a cowboy who would heal her heart.